Hello, hello. Are we live? Hello, my friends. Let me double check that we are live. Yes, it says we are. Good. I can hear volume. How are you all doing? How are you doing? It's good to be here. Good to be here. Hi, Irene. I am super excited to be here. How are you doing? Hi, Funke. How are you doing? Amazing. How's your week been? We are live again today, and the topics get amazing, more amazing as we go, actually, because we kind of dive in a little deeper each time, but maybe not so deep. Maybe not so deep, it confuses anyone. So, how are you all doing? Um, Hope you're having a great week. Very well, nice. Amazing. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our live training tonight. And I'm very excited to be here. I'm always happy to show up and do this training and just to hang out with you guys on a Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Welcome, 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 welcome. Well, we have emails going out. Other folks are going to join us at some point, but let's get started. If you don't know me, I am Yinka Olumorin. I'm a coach on our platform here, amazing platform, Acquire Real Estates. Pretty much buying properties in this space for investment purposes, for cash flow, monthly income, for cash outs, big, massive cash outs. And that's what we do in this space. I have currently done over 45 deals, ranging from wholesaling to lease options, fix and flips, rentals, both long term, short term rentals, multifamily, and new constructions. Okay. And I always mention this that within 36 months of starting our business, we move from 6 to 7 figures. And I think this is important for a newbie. How far can you go in 3 years? And I think saying this helps you put things in perspective. Dream a little bit bigger than what you're dreaming of right now. Maybe some of you are thinking, you'll probably do a couple of these deals in 10 years and 5 years, but I am an example that it's actually possible to do it, to do more deals earlier in your journey. And my students actually do more than I did starting out. So it's very possible to go far in real estate investing starting out. I invest with my husband, Dari, and I'm excited to be here. Please introduce yourself in the comments and tell us where you're from. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 ways to make monthly income on a property you do not own. Okay, and why is this relevant? Why are we talking about making money on properties we don't own? First of all, for me, that's how I pretty much started my real estate investing journey with no money down because I was one of those people who had no choice. Okay. So starting out, I had little money. Honestly, let's be honest here. I didn't have any money starting out. I was broke. Of course, I had a six-figure job, but I was barely making ends meet. Looking forward to that paycheck, going from one paycheck to another. I don't know if you're here and you feel the same way. You feel like you keep going, waiting for that paycheck to come in or that pay stub to be cleared. That was my situation, and I got really tired. I didn't have that financial freedom and I didn't have that time freedom. I think the time freedom was the biggest thing for me because I had little kids and I just had those babies, and it was just tough having enough time, spending time with them. I couldn't really imagine what the future would be. I was hoping things would get better as I started my job then. And then I realized it wasn't getting better. I kind of got a hang of the system. So I got to understand very early that the system is the way it is and nobody can change it. Okay. So I had to figure out how to invest with no money, considering my situation. How do I do this whole real estate investing thing with no money in my account? I would hear different seminars, no money down here, no money down there, and it wasn't really making a lot of sense until I dived in a little deeper. And I was able to do that as well. So that's how I started out the different strategies, no money down, and continued that way. So I had no option, and that's why I'm very passionate about letting you guys know what this whole thing is all about. Okay. All right, so let's dive right into the training. 3 ways to make monthly income on a property you do not own. All right, so there are 3 simple ways. And like I always say, keep it as simple as possible. Because when you keep it simple, you're able to execute, you're able to get it done. But if it feels complex, you're not able to really do anything with the information. There's a lot of information out there, but how many can we really implement? How many can we put to good use? So there are 3 beginner-friendly ways to make monthly income on a property you do not own. And we're talking about them tonight. Okay, so the first thing is wholesaling. You've probably heard about wholesaling. What is wholesaling? Wholesaling is simply when you have an agreement to buy a property and then you assign or trade that agreement to another person at a price so that they can purchase the property in your place. So they are buying the property, you're not buying the property. You had the agreement, but now you're selling your agreement to another interested party to go ahead and close on that property. And what you are getting from that is the assignment fee. That means you get paid usually around, say, a couple of thousands to assign when you assign this contract to another investor who is interested in moving forward with that property. Okay, so let me just give you guys a full picture of wholesaling. Again, you might know things in little bits here and there, but you might not have the full picture together. So here's the full picture. So let's say this is you, and you actually approach the seller. I don't know why I have emotions going on, but that's okay. I'll manage. You approach a seller to who is selling the property, right? So you say, okay, I have this agreement with you that I'm going to buy this property. And then you went ahead and assigned that agreement to another investor who is actually going to be the person buying the property. No, you're not a realtor. No, you're not a broker. You're not brokering this deal. You're only assigning it. You're selling it to somebody else. You're selling your rights in that property to somebody else. So you're not linking up a buyer and a seller. No, that's called brokering. And you need a license to broker. Okay. Well, you don't need a license for wholesaling. If you are the investor, you position yourself as the investor, you put the property under contract, and you assign it to another investor who wants to go ahead to buy that deal, right? And there are tons of investors looking for deals, looking for good deals, right? So let's explain even further. For example, let's assume here that you had your agreement to buy that property with a seller at 70,000. So that's how much you want to buy that property for. Okay. And then you went ahead and assigned this property to another investor at 90,000. So that means you added some money in between as your fee, right? Of assigning to another investor. Keeping in mind that 70K works for the seller, 90K works for the investor. The investor actually is grateful for this deal. They love the deal, okay, right? Because there is profit in it. They probably would make 50K. They probably make 60K. They probably make 70K. Who knows, right? Depending on your analysis, depending on how you punch in the numbers. So the investor is making money and you're helping the seller. You are also making money, okay? But your specialty is actually in finding the deal, right? So you found a deal and you assigned it to another investor. Okay. And then you made 20K because you subtract that 70K from 90K. You are making 20K as a wholesaler. Now, I want you to keep in mind that When you're putting this property under contract with the seller, you're only putting down a little amount of money, right? Some people can go as low as $10, which in my opinion is ridiculous, right? I just want to have a little bit more skin in the game. But yes, it's 10 if it's $10, it's still legally binding. As long as the seller is fine with that, $10 is legally binding. But if you wanted to show a little bit more seriousness, then you go a little higher to 100 or maybe even up to 500, right? So you have little, very extremely little money in the deal. $10 is something that probably buy you lunch or half a lunch, right? So it's almost as though you have nothing in it to be able to get that property under contract. And then you assign this to another investor. So let me ask you this. If you had a skill like this that nets you 20,000 from a $10 down, would it make sense? Actually, this ends up being nothing because that $10 gets added on the closing as part of your deposit. You can get it back actually, or the $100 something you get back somewhere in the closing. When you're putting documents together, you get that money back. So at the end of the day, you actually have no money in the deal. So would it be worth it for you to put down a small amount and net $20,000? Would it be worth having that skill? Would it be worth knowing how to find such properties, and how to find another investor that you can assign it to? I think the answer is a capital yes, right? So that's what we're talking about here. Okay. So you make that assignment fee of 20,000. Okay. All right. When we're talking about this assignment fee and you're putting down such a little amount of money like $10, how much are people making on assignment fees? Let's just look around. Let's be realistic. And let's see what are people making on assignment fees, right? Not just on paper, but in real life, how much are people making? So it depends on the margin. It could be as low as $2,000 or $5,000, or mid-range like $10,000 or $20,000, or even as high as $50,000, $100,000. I certainly have seen $100,000 people making that much on assigning a property. And that means that they were able to get an extremely fantastic deal. Okay. So, and how do you get an extremely fantastic deal? It really depends on how you calculate your offer from the start. The amount you offer to pay for the property will determine the kind of profits you make on the property. So, I'll say that again, the amount you offer to pay for the property is really what will determine the kind of profits that you're going to make on that deal. And that's why it's important for you to know the offer formula. And we did this before, okay? So this time around, remember we discussed the offer formula in a previous training. If you need a refresher on this training, type refresher in the comments and Kristen will send it to you. Okay, so if you need a refresher on that offer training, type refresher in the comments and Kristen will send that over to you. So also, Kristen is sending a lot of resources, but the only way you can get them is if you check your DM. Okay, that is check your message requests, especially if you're not Kristen's friend. She's not going to be able to send those to you. You're not going to have access if you're not her friend, except you check your message request. So make sure you're checking your message request because she has been sending a lot of resources. Okay, so type refresher in the comments and Kristen will send that to you, that refresher training. So in that training, we had the offer formula as offer equals 75% of our after repair value minus repairs. And that's how much you will offer for a property to be able to make a huge profit on it. Okay, and that training goes in depth into other things, how to find and all that. Okay, so this time around, it's kind of the same formula, but how much are we offering on the wholesaling side of things? if you approach that seller and you wanted to make an offer on a property and you had no clue how to even make an offer that makes sense. Okay, so your max offer would be at 75% of your after-repair value minus repairs minus the amounts that you're looking to make on that deal. That's your wholesale fee or assignment fee. So the wholesale fee is your assignment fee. So this time around, we're actually adding that wholesale fee into that formula. Okay. Because if you don't add your fee in, the formula is just going to be good for your end buyer. Okay. But if you add your fee in, you're sure that your end buyer also makes profits. Okay. So, I mean, there's no point if your end buyer does not make profits. They're not going to come back to you. They're not going to use you in the future. So the best way to keep that business moving is if you're doing a great job creating a win-win between all parties. And that's what business is all about, right? Good business is about treating you right, you treating me right, I getting what I want from that deal, and you also getting what you want from that deal. Everybody's happy, nobody feels exploited, everybody sees it as a great opportunity. That is real business. Okay. So the only way you can make that happen is to make sure that you're using the right process and formulas. Okay. All right. So what is the risk? Maybe you're asking, what is the risk with this kind of arrangements? Let's say you find a seller and you assign to another investor. I mean, what is the risk in making 20K out of like $10 or $20 or $100 or whatever you decide to put down? There has to be something, right? One thing you need to make sure is that your contract is assignable. That means that you can assign that contract to another investor. If you cannot assign that contract to another investor, you are stuck. You don't want to be stuck. Okay. So make sure you can assign that contract. And generally speaking, if the contract does not say not assignable, you are fine. Okay. Generally speaking, if your contract does not say that you cannot assign it, you are fine. Is this legal? Yes. Everything is done legally. Okay. Do you need a license to do this? We said that before. No. Anybody can do this. You can do this in any market as well, as long as you're checking your numbers correctly and using the right formula. Okay. That refresher training also tells you how to find a seller and another investor. Okay. So that tells you how to find a seller and another investor. And that's why that refresher training is very important. Okay. So type that in and Christine will send that over to you. Okay. Another beginner friendly way to make monthly income on a property that does not belong to you is through lease options. What is lease option? Lease option is the same as rent to own. So let's say you're renting a property with an option to buy it. So you're renting a property and your contract says you have an option to buy it at a certain price. That is one cool way for investors like you and I to make cool money. My first deal in real estate investing was rent to own. My second deal was a rent to own because it was so easy to get into. Right? Rent to own is a big deal. You can start to cash flow immediately without owning a property from a rent to own agreement. So let's look at the full picture on the rent to own. This is you, okay? And you approached a seller, someone who's looking to sell their property. And what you're really offering them is to rent the property at $1,000 and potentially buy it. So that option is a potential, right? But you also are interested in buying it because your offer is good and you know that down the line you're going to make money. So that option is an opportunity for you, right? So you're saying, I want to rent this property at this amount and I want to buy it in the future, say in 5 years at this amount. Okay. And we're going to go over why a seller would ever agree to that kind of arrangement. Because I know some of you are thinking, why would anyone allow that? Right. So you have this happening. You say, I want to rent at this, and in a couple of years, I want to buy at this. And like I said, these are some of my first deals in real estate invested. And they're very, very simple to execute. Okay. And so you find a tenant buyer. You find a tenant buyer, and you actually have that tenant buyer rent that property from you at 1,500, right? You are paying $1,000 in rent to the seller. The tenant buyer is paying 1,500 to you as the sub landlord, is what we call you in this situation. We call you a sub landlord. The seller is the landlord in quotes. Okay. You are the sub landlord. You're practically the owner. The seller is not really overseeing anything. They're really just getting their monthly 1K a month that they're very happy with. They're able to pay their mortgage and expenses at 700, for instance. Okay. And they're very happy with the consistent cash flow. They don't need to worry about finding a property manager. They have a better tenant in there, which is a tenant buyer, because someone who's looking to buy a property would take better care of that property than a random tenant, right? A random tenant will not take care of that property as much as someone who's looking to buy it in the future. They're not going to destroy the electricals. They're not going to destroy the mechanicals. They're not going to act like, they're going to basically treat that home like theirs because they are a tenant buyer, a more special kind of buyers. Okay. And the landlord loves this opportunity. They like that somebody else who is not like a random regular tenant would be there to take care of their property, and they're fine with that. Okay. So you're making $500 every single month in the rent difference. All right. So your rent in 24 months. Let's really calculate what your profit looks like right now. $500 in rent every single month. Let's say you have a 24-month agreement in quotes. So for a whole 2 years, you're doing $500 a month, and you're making $500 in month in rent difference. That is your cash flow without owning the property. That is how much you're making every month without owning the property. And you did that for 24 months. So now we're going to talk about the buy-in. You had this agreement with the tenant buyer also that they were going to buy at 150. So you're buying at 100K. The tenant buyer is buying at 150K. So you can already see the buy difference, how much you're making with this agreement when the tenant buyer is buying at this amount and the landlord is selling to you at this amount. Okay, so you have that 50K buy difference right here. And what this situation does for you is you're able to cash now because the tenant buyer actually pays you a deposit to get into the deal. They pay you a deposit to get into the deal. So you're getting cash upfront. Then you get that cash flow, which is going back here, is your monthly payments, that monthly payments you get. So you're not just getting paid every single month, but you also get a cash later. After the tenant buyer buys this property at 150, 50K goes to you and 100K goes to the seller. So you are making $50,000 in that buy difference. Okay, so that's what's special about lease options. That is what is special about lease options. If you calculated your rent difference for 24 months, you're going to be at $12,000 in monthly income at the end of 2 years, right? And then they execute this option. You are at 62,000 total. If you added that 50,000 and that 12,000, you made $62,000 from this deal without even owning that property. How cool is that? How cool is that? Okay, so you're asking, how do we find these properties? I am going to share that with you shortly. Okay, so again, your deposits, let's talk about deposits right now for lease options. It's quite different from wholesaling, right? So in this case, your deposit could be as low as $100. So I have done both $100 and $1,000, depending on the deal, depending on how good the deal is looking. Of course, the better the deal looks, the more you want to invest in it. Just generally speaking, the better you want to be, the more you want to be seen as serious, as having skin in the game. Okay. So this is very subjective, but I think if someone is entrusting their property in your hands, you probably want to look as serious as possible. Okay. So because it's also extremely low risk. If you're going in at 100,000, I'm sorry, at $100, and your tenant buyer already puts down a certain deposit, you're already making money upfront. Even if you put down 1,000 instead of $100, if you put down $1,000, you're making money upfront because your tenant buyer will put down a certain percentage money down of that 150 entire purchase price, right? So it can be 3%, it can be 5%, which is also attractive to them because on a mortgage, usually the best mortgages will probably be around 3-5%, right? So you're making that cash upfront. Okay. All right. So the risks are quite low. Why would a seller want to do that? First of all, a seller might be moving, right? So they don't have time to sell. They don't have time to sell. They don't have time to put it on the market. They don't want to be paying two mortgages, one mortgage in a different city and another mortgage in a different city, or paying a rent somewhere else and they have a mortgage on a house to pay. They don't have time to be a landlord. They have no clue how this whole thing works. It's not their thing, but they need a quick solution. Okay, they can't put it on the market because they have to pay the next mortgage is coming soon. Right. Well, this is one of the reasons a seller would do that. And then a seller, and this is a very sweet spot where I get most deals done, is a low equity. If a seller can sell because they don't have enough money, they don't have enough equity in the property, that is an opportunity for lease options. That means that they are going to need time to come out of, they're going to need time to sell that property. Otherwise, they have to come out of pocket at closing. They have to pay the difference. So let's say um, they the property they want to sell at 100,000, and the max amount they can sell the property on the markets is 100,000, right? Well, I wouldn't say they want to. That's the max amount they want to sell at. They have to sell at 100,000 because you have to go by the market value. You cannot sell a property beyond the market value. Okay. So the max they can sell is at 100,000. Now they owe 95,000 or 98,000 on their mortgage. That's trouble because when they go to closing table, they probably will have to come up with maybe 10K, 10,000. They have taxes to pay. Um, there's a lot that goes on in closing. So their closing costs alone would make them have to come up with money out of pocket. And they're not willing to do that. They don't even have the money to come up with. And just talking about this, it's making me reflect on a few deals that I've done, that exactly the situation where people actually have no option than to lose on a property by selling it, right? But you are saving them here because what happens is you're holding on to this property, helping them save time, get more equity. The more mortgages that are paid on that property, the more equity you build. And that way they can potentially close and make money on it rather than lose money, right? That way they get to build on that equity. So down the line, now they have better equity and they're able to go to closing and get something out of it. Right. So you are there to help them. So these are two big reasons why a seller would actually agree to do that. Okay. So why would a tenant want that? Number one, poor credit. They want to buy a house, but they don't have good credit. So now you're giving them an opportunity to rent to buy a house. You're even providing maybe the opportunity to build equity where you give them rent credits. So every month they pay their rents on time, they get what $100 that goes into the purchase price of the house, for example, right? And when you add that up to $100 uh, per month for a year, that's it is way over $1,000 for every year that they did grades on that property, and that goes towards the purchase. So you're actually helping your tenant buyers build equity. The other reason is locking down the price, and I cannot tell you how lucky my tenant buyers have been with locking down the price because real estate really just continues to get better. Properties are appreciating as we go, right? So even if you looked at the market crash that happened back in 2008 and you looked at that 20-year timeline, properties still, even with those zigzags, they still appreciated over that space of 20 years, right? So generally speaking, real estate definitely appreciates over time, if not for any reason, but for inflation, right? But we know it's beyond inflation because that appreciation definitely happens. Okay, so your tenant buyers are so pleased because when it's time to exercise their option, now they're buying the property for even less than anything else they can find on the market. And this happened to my tenant buyers, even for those that exercised within a year, which is amazing. Okay. Okay, there's actually something I wanted to mention here. So, in the future, and if you're thinking about this, you might be thinking, how about if the seller kind of gets greedy in the future because now the property is worth more, but they got to lock down a price earlier in the future, earlier in the past, right? They locked down a price in the past. Now they're currently in the future, and the property is worth more. Unfortunately, you know, yes, unfortunately they have to. They have to sell. They have to sell because they're under contract, but they're still in a better position. They're still better off in that future because they got to build equity. They got to build equity. They got to be in a better place where they could sell rather than losing money. Now they're making money as well. Okay, good. So maybe you're also thinking, what ifs, right? Because things happen in real estate investing. What if the tenant fails and doesn't exercise the option? Okay, so this is really what happens. Let's say if the tenant fails, they said we're going to buy, now they're not buying. You have to look for a different tenant buyer. Definitely, you need a different tenant buyer. But that is very good for you because remember the old tenant buyer put down a deposit. Now they have to lose it because they're not going forward with their purchase. Okay. Now you have a new tenant buyer who puts down another deposit, which is a good thing for you because you make two deposits instead of one. Okay. Unfortunately, if they're not keeping to the agreement, they would fail. They wouldn't be able to have that. They would actually have to let go of that deposit. Okay. So it's not really something that affects you. And it's also great that the tenant can leave the agreement if they have to. Okay. Like one of my tenant buyers actually had to move out of state on military. Unfortunately, weren't able to. But they were also fine, letting that deposit go because, you know, um, they would rather be able to get out of that contract than not be able to get out of the contract. So they lost on that. Okay, but moved to something else that was important for their lives. And now another tenant came in and definitely paid that deposit again. So you are making more money doing that. And what you want to make sure to do is to make sure that you have a shorter term with that tenant buyer than what you have with the landlord. So, for example, with the landlord, you have 5 years. With the tenant buyers, you have 2 years, just in case you need an extension, just in case you need to switch tenant buyers. Okay. Now, the second thing you guys would think about or would have on your mind, the second question is damages. How do you address damages? So the tenant assumes damages in a lease option agreement. They assume the responsibilities, just like a homeowner would. And the contract says that as well. It's like when you're buying a house, would you take care of it? Would you do what you need to do? So they are responsible, okay, for any damages that they cause. This way, you're avoiding risks, okay? you're getting rid of those unnecessary risks by having the right contracts and agreements. Okay, which an attorney would draft for you, by the way. Okay. All right. The third beginner friendly way to earn money from properties that you don't own is arbitrage. Maybe you've heard about arbitrage before. It's also called Airbnb arbitrage. Well, I would say the most popular form of arbitrage is Airbnb arbitrage. And it is amazing. Okay, so most of you have heard about Airbnb, and arbitrage simply means that you are subleasing a property as well, but this time around, you don't have that option to buy. Okay, so this is you go to a landlord and you sublease that property to use that as Airbnb to other guests. Okay, so let's say you agree with the landlord to pay 1,500 every month, and your guests come in and let's say you grossed at 3,500 for the month. Expenses, cleaning and everything, you're at 950 in expenses. So your profit is when you subtract that 1,500 in rent, and that's 950, subtract that two amounts out of 3,500. So you're making $1,000 a month. And this is very, very small in my opinion. And I'll talk about that. So you are making $1,000 per month on this property. So why would a landlord agree to arbitrage, right? Because you're constantly maintaining their home in a 5-star condition to get great reviews. Because your Airbnb business is a reviews business. If you don't do great, you're not going to get good reviews and you're not going to have clients, you're not going to have guests. So you have that obligation to do great on your Airbnb. Okay. And that's important by keeping your house clean, providing guests, amenities, and just really making sure that home is in good condition. So you have a stake to keep the landlord's property in good condition. And that's why a landlord would be attracted to that offer. Okay, so how do we find a landlord? It's very easy. Zillow, Trulia, any of those sites, apartments.com, any of those sites where landlords are renting out properties is a good place to find arbitrage. Okay, and you're really just contacting them and asking them if you can use that property as an Airbnb, or you're going under your LLC to ask or actually offer them the opportunity for arbitrage. So you're telling them about the good benefits on how you're maintaining this property. Okay. You're telling them exactly what your goal is and what your plan is and what you intend to do for them, for their property. Okay. So you can pitch to, let's say, 10 landlords and one accepts. Not every landlord would accept that, but if you had to pitch to 20 landlords and 2 accepted, would that be worth it for you? Of course, right? Pitching is not a great deal. You just need to get your stuff together and approach them, right? And sometimes it's a copy and paste, right? So that is exactly how it works, because real estate investing is a numbers game. Not everyone is going to accept your offer, whether you're doing wholesaling, whether you're doing arbitrage, whether you're doing these options. But you're putting that offer out. You're consistently making offers to get deals. Okay. Because one deal can actually be a game changer for you. Imagine making 62,000 on a lease options. And that's not the only deal you did that year. Maybe that year you did 2 deals a month, right? So you're making 62,000 twice in a month. Yes, some of the profit gets deferred into the future, but the truth is you're making that income, right? What if you're making 2,000 a month on a few property, on, let's say you've made actually the least at 500 in cash flow, and you multiplied that by 6? How much is that? And you kept going. How much income would you make every month? So real estate investing is a numbers game. You work your way backwards from how much income you want to make every month. Okay. Whether you have a good credit or not, whether you have money or not, there are different strategies that work for you based on your situation. So why rental arbitrage? Is it even legal? Yes, but some states do not want this. Okay. So check on each state's website for information. Okay. All right. So the biggest reason for arbitrage is high cash flow. So, like I was saying, $1,000 every month is highly conservative. Where I am, I make an average of net 2K on each house. Okay. You can make a lot of monthly income from arbitrage. And my area is very, very conservative, like I said. There are even better areas where you make more. Okay. So, how it's different from the other method is that although you have a higher cash flow, actually, you have higher upfront costs. Okay. So instead of putting down $10 here, $100 here, 500 here, 1K here max, here actually you have to set up the property. You have to buy furnitures. You have to pay security deposit. Otherwise, though, it's a higher cash flow scenario compared to the other ones we had discussed. Okay. So arbitrage is a big deal. So let's talk about the what ifs under arbitrage. Maybe you're wondering, guest damage again. What if the guests damage the property, right? On your Airbnb. So Airbnb actually has their guaranteed host protection and they reimburse. So they would reimburse you for any damages. Plus, remember also guests also have where you can review them. So most guests actually don't want a bad review because that will affect if they get future bookings or not. Okay. Do damages happen every now and then? Sometimes a guest is it wasn't intentional, and that is good that you get reimbursed for that. If you notice any damages after a guest leaves, you contact Airbnb right away and file a reimbursement, okay, and get it fixed. But generally speaking, guests really want to maintain that good review as well because many hosts actually have to they get requests. So if you're looking for a property to rent on Airbnb website, you have to send in a request for the host to approve. If the host sees that you have bad reviews, they're not going to approve you. You're going to have a very hard time finding an Airbnb property to rent. So most guests are aware of this and they wouldn't trash your property intentionally. Maybe you're also thinking, what if no one rents the property? What if you don't get any bookings? Is cash flow guaranteed? And all that. So your cash flow and how much you make depends on the location that you choose. Okay. So your location is very important, very necessary. Don't worry. I put together a resource for you guys. It's a list of top 135 cities for Airbnb income. And that goes from a projected income of 3,000 every month to 17,000 every month, depending on the area. So if you want that resource, certainly all you need to do is just type in Airbnb in the comments if you want the list, and Kristen is going to send that over to you. So type Airbnb in the comments if you want that list of 135 top cities for Airbnb because your location is very important. And also remember to type that refresh in the comments if you want that refresher course on calculating your offer. Okay, because that course is actually very, very, very important. Honestly, I have to let you guys know it's like the basics. That's where you know where to find the deal, where to find the seller, where to find other investors to assign a deal to. So make sure you have that too. We are also giving out a few more free spots for discovery calls, okay, where we dive into your specific situation and the way forward. You get free advice. Okay. So that is for next week. We have some few spots available. So if you want that, you want to get free advice, you want to get a free call, definitely type discovery into the comments. And I'll see you in the next training. I'm just scrolling through for any questions. The only question I see here is how do we find those properties? And if you go through that refresher course, you're actually going to have your question answered. And we did address how to find on the Airbnb side of things. We said the places like Zillow, Redfin. Okay, so type discovery into comments if you want to snatch those spots for next week on the free discovery and free advice. And also type in refresh for the refresher course and Airbnb for the list of top 135 cities based on income projection for your Airbnb. And this is the end of the training. Have a great night, everyone.